Happy Martin Luther King Day, everyone. Just wanted to do a kind of quick video. Another early morning thing. That's why I look so disheveled and tired. Early morning for me because this is my off day and I like to sleep in a little bit. It's a little luxury I get when you don't have kids and, my wife's at work and I'm just chilling and enjoying this wonderful MLK Day. Just gonna hang out with the puppy. Just gonna spend some time thinking about a lot of things and play some video games, of course. See, in my household, the topic of race is definitely one that we have to have. Hello, pup. Hi, so yeah, my puppy. Sorry. The topic of race is definitely one that we have to have constantly, not from the perspective of me versus my wife or anything like that. It's always from a position of trying to understand the best way to deal with what I would call easy easy to deny racism. We as white people spend a lot of our time trying to find new ways to say something isn't racist to people who are affected by racism and recognize what racism is. We spend an unbelievable amount of time doing that just to degrade the opinions of those who are the affected. And at the end of the day, I think we concentrate a lot, as a people, on the wrong questions. So I'm gonna start doing my videos. I think I finally came up with a name for my podcast. Asking the wrong questions. So, what are the right questions to ask about Trump's shithole comment? Well, for one thing, we need to recognize what the wrong questions are. The wrong questions are, is what he said racist? Because then we get to have this conversation where people get to say no. The problem with that is it really boils down to the amount of say that they get to have on that subject. Because it's usually white people, like myself. They're usually already feeling a certain way about Trump. And they see that as, well, we feel a certain way. Because, as we all know, right wing is all about projection. They're all about saying, well, if I'm doing a thing, you're doing that. Never mind the fact that we can actually prove what it is we're even saying. That doesn't matter to them. So the wrong questions are, is it racist? Well, I mean, they can try and refute it all they want. They can try. But the list is ever growing, and they say everything. It's only a coincidence that he spent most of his time talking about how bad London was and how they were asking for a terrorist attack when they had a Muslim mayor. It's got nothing to do with the fact that they have a Muslim mayor, except he attacks the Muslim mayor. There are several times where he's planned visits and MPs had come out and voted on resolutions to block his travel to their country because they didn't want to be attached to him. They were mostly white. Has he said anything about the MPs? No. But he does talk about their Muslim mayor in London. Weird that. He has a tendency of attacking primarily black people, primarily Muslim people, primarily Mexican people. Oh, that judge in my case where I made a fake university to scam kids out of their money, that's he can't rule against me properly on a case about making a fake university. Um, he can't rule on that because he's Mexican. It's almost like he recognizes that he might have said some bad things about Mexicans and that it's a little racist, right? But nah, not to his supporters. No, no, no. He just meant he meant the thing. He's not racist. White nationalism isn't racist. It's just backed by a lot of racists who say very, very racist things and believes that the white race has a carte blanche ownership of this country and that we built everything on everything and that we're heading to a white genocide and blah blah blah. So I mean, these are the wrong conversations to have because they don't end anything. They start it. I like conversation enders. And you don't always get there right away. I like those things that people have to avoid answering because they know if they did, they'd be stuck. Those are the right questions. Let me try and think of more wrong questions to ask. Another wrong question to ask. Are those countries shitholes? That's the wrong question. Why is that the wrong question? It's very simple. Because he wasn't talking about just the countries. He was talking about the people that come here. He said, and I quote, "Why do we get so many people who come here, from shithole countries?" Or, depending on the reporting, shithouse countries I saw. That was a correction. As if it matters. Whatever. I prefer the word shithole as opposed to shithouse. Shithouse kind of gives this connotation of like a big burly dude, and that's not what he was talking about. He was talking about places that are rife with crime, rife with poverty, and, that people chose to leave. They chose to leave and to come here. Maybe they had to leave because this is the opportunity that was presented to them. We offered them this opportunity to get out of, say, I don't know, a country that is ravaged by a giant earthquake that has left mudslides toppling all land structures and leaving them fending for natural resources. Maybe that's why they left. But that's not the question they want to ask. They want to say, well, they are shithole countries, aren't they? Maybe they are. So then why did he... What's the point? See, it's easy to go ahead and define what people would constitute a city or a country or anything, any landmass, any place as a shithole, because you say, well, this is a place that does not look desirable to live in for most people. And that's a conversation that we very well could have. We could have a conversation on, how they ended up that way. How El Salvador, miraculously just became one of the deadliest countries in the world and racked with war when they previously had some pretty stable leaders that, just so happened to be taken out and deposed by a certain government, we'll say. Or the country of Africa, as Trump put it. He didn't say the country, but he said El Salvador, Haiti, and Africa. Which, I'll remind people, is not a country, it's a continent. A continent full of several different races, several different religions, over 50 different countries. They all have their own cultures. They all have their own problems. They all have their own, even climates. It's not all one climate. There is a savanna in Africa that covers a good portion of Africa, but is not the majority of it. There is desert out there, but that's not the majority of it. There is jungle out there, that's not the majority of it. So it's almost like you're talking about a huge, giant fucking landmass that we pale in comparison to, even if you include Canada and Mexico in North America's continent. We don't have as many countries in there and cultures as Africa does. It is a giant place. So he paints it with a broad brush, and we're stuck to ask, well, is Africa a shithole? Well, I mean, there are a bunch of countries that are ravaged with war and ravaged with poverty. Sure. We could go ahead and say that, yes, they are. But there's also a lot of countries where they're very rich. I mean, United Arab Emirates is one of the richest countries in the world, has the highest population density of rich people in it. Hell, their fucking cops have drive around Ferraris and Lamborghinis. They got monies over there, mostly because of oil. I wouldn't call up, I would not call Dubai a shithole city. I wouldn't call the UAE a shithole country. But guess what? It's in Africa, and because you painted it with a broad brush when you were actually meant, Africans in the sense of black. We know what you mean. So the conversation about whether or not these countries are shitholes or not always starts with, well, they are shitholes. And we can't have the conversation about, well, are they actually, or how did they end up there? Because that's not what he was saying. That's not what he said. And we're dissecting a very simple statement because people don't want to admit one simple fact. Our president is a racist. So that's the wrong question. Because again, it starts something. If you're on that side and you say, well, are they shitholes? You're not stopping anything. You're not stopping liberals in their tracks and putting us in our place. No, you're pointing out your own bias based on ignoring what was actually said and not coming to terms with what was actually said. And yes, he said it. That's another conversation you can have. You can't ask, well, how can we trust the people who reported it that he actually said it? Well, for one thing, it was just confirmed today by a conservative writer that he called up him and several of the other conservative writers and friends of Donald Trump and bragged about the comment, saying, yeah, I asked why all these people are coming from shithole countries. So, confirmation upon confirmation upon confirmation upon confirmation. Another question you can't ask is, well, why are you so offended by the word shithole? I don't give a fuck about the word shithole. I live in a shithole. I can admit that. It's a city that has been trying for decades to get back on its feet and just can't. I live across the street from an abandoned house. I live down the street from another abandoned house. There are more than 10 abandoned houses in my neighborhood, mixed in with nice newer houses like mine, and some older houses that have been taken care of rather well. And then there's some really crappy houses that people still live in. And then there's the abandoned houses. We're mixed. Most people would say that Flint is a shithole. I might agree with them. I would also agree that it can come back, and I would agree that we can overcome our situation. But as things stand right now, the word shithole describes my city pretty well. I get it. So then, we don't need to have that conversation, though. That's not what he said. That's not what he said. So, what is the question that you should be asking? It's very simple. And on both sides, it's the showstopper. It's the conversation ender and creates the conversation that we need to have. That question is, if he isn't racist, if what he said isn't racist, if what he said wasn't about the people, why is it a problem that those people are here now? Well, there you go. That tells you everything you need to know. I've asked a few of these right-wingers on Twitter that question, and they can't answer that. They really can't. Why is it a problem that they're here? Well, then, if they answer it with what they want to answer it, it shows their racism. Oh, well, they vote. Oh, well, they don't pay taxes. Oh, well, they don't work hard. Well, all those things aren't true. Now you're just attacking the people. Now you're admitting that he was attacking the people, and you're admitting that he was justified in attacking the people. You're saying that his racism was correct. But you can't admit that. On our end, it asks the pertinent question. Why is it a problem that they're here? It isn't. We recognize why they're here. We know why they're here. We know what they ran away from. We know what they left. We know that maybe one of these days they'll return to it. But while they're here, they are paying taxes. Sales tax is a tax. They have to buy shit. We're a capitalist society. So they do pay taxes. They get no benefit from it, though. Beyond, the relocation fees and everything, they have to find jobs themselves. They have to work hard here. So they pay into payroll tax. They pay into Social Security. They'll never see that. They pay into Medicare. They'll never see that. And if they decide to go through with their citizenship and say, you know what, I can't go back to that country because it's a shithole, then guess what? They're Americans. And if you have a problem with them doing that, that tells me a lot more about you than it does about me. It tells you a lot more about what you actually understand Trump to be saying versus what you wish he would have said, which is nothing. Because I know these conversations are really uncomfortable. I get it. I started these conversations fairly young, growing up in a mostly black school with a high Muslim population in a mostly black city. I had to have a lot of conversations with my friends, who a lot of them did turn out to be black, and my family, which now I have an extended family that is black. I have a wife that is black. We've had to have these conversations, and you have to do a whole lot of listening and a whole lot less talking over people, because at the end of the day, the people who get to decide what is and isn't racist is not me. It is not you, other white person who defends Trump. And it's also not these Uncle Toms that get to go out and say whatever they want about their race because, oh wait, a black guy said it, so that gives it some validity. That doesn't work either. There is no validity here. The statement was racist because he was talking about people as a problem. They wear the stink of their country. If I move to a nicer city, like, I don't know, we've got a lot of nice cities in Michigan. Let's say I moved to Ann Arbor and I got a nice job and I worked myself up. No one would be looking down on me. No one would be looking at me as a person who came here from a shithole city. That stink is gone off of me. But if we're living in a majority white city, they might think the same of my wife. My wife, who grew up in a nicer household than I did, who, was from the richer side of town. My wife, who has a well-paying career, a trade that it leaves for plenty of advancement, who pays for the majority of our livelihood while I try to do the same thing to gain the same level of uh, uh, of employment. Something I'm trying to do, but I'm not there yet. She got there first. I helped her through that. Now, she's the head of the household in that manner. And we're fine with that until I can pull my own weight and we can get on our feet. That's all fine. But if she goes to a majority white city that has a majority, white or upper class, middle class uh, background, they will look at her as wearing the stink of her city. She will be that person from a shithole city, not me. They'll look at her and say, oh, she's from Flint. They won't look at me and think that. Why do you think that is? I mean, what is the key difference between me and her? Why do you think I don't wear the stink of my city and she does? It's racism. She's black. I'm white. Anywhere I go, I will be welcomed in with open arms. I will get to hear all the racist shit that white people say behind black people's backs, as I always have. And I always tell her and her family about. It's like, you have no idea what white people say behind your back. And I usually tell her. And that's just for a start. Even the well-meaning ones say some really stupid shit. And I try to correct them. I try to do my part, but you can only do so much. And, sometimes you can't alienate yourself from everyone. It's difficult. It's family. It's coworkers. You do what you can to make sure to not rock the boat so that you can live your life. But at the end of the day, what are we even talking about? Why are we having this conversation about if it was racist? The African nations that he was talking about seemed to think it was racist. El Salvador, our ambassadors from El Salvador seem to think it was racist. Black people seem to think it was racist. Mexicans thinks it's a racist. Latinos thinks it's racist. Muslims thinks he's a racist. All these minority groups that he is always talking about thinks he's a racist. Yet we have several white guys that look like me but don't think like me, saying, no, it's not. We don't get to decide that. When he says, why do we get people from shithole countries as opposed to good countries like Norway, we know what he means. Because if someone moves here from Norway, doesn't pay any taxes, becomes a drug dealer, and ends up killing a few people, there is not going to be the stench of Norway on him. No one's going to say, oh God, those fucking Norwegians. But if someone from El Salvador comes here and does the same exact thing, he becomes, oh, it's those Mexicans. Because we have no recognition of that there are other Latin American countries in the world. We just think if they come here, they're Mexican. They're brown. They're not brown enough to be black, and they're not, brown enough to be Middle Eastern. So clearly they're Mexicans. So we know what he was talking about. So we have to ask the question of, why is it a problem that they're here? As far as I'm concerned, they're here and they're Americans. They're here and they're being taken care of by good Americans. And it doesn't matter that they're here now, and it shouldn't matter. So then why does it? Why does our president seem to think that this is a problem? It's because he's a racist and he sees brown people, and he'd much rather have the nice white people from Norway. And guess what? They don't want to come here. Think about what they would be giving up to come here. They don't give a shit about us. So, Ask the right question to all your people who want to ask the wrong ones. It doesn't matter at all whether we quibble about whether or not it was racist or not, because the people affected seem to think it is. It doesn't matter that, these countries may not be classified as a shithole. And it may or may not be bad language, but you know what? We could have a conversation about their conditions, but we're not going to. And B, it doesn't matter how he said it, or if we would say it to each other. We're not president of the United States. We don't have any bearing on the foreign relations with the rest of the world and those countries. He does. He jammed a fork in the eye of all those countries and Africa and into the eye of our diplomacy. And he showed us again who he is. And we need to believe these people the first time they show us. I believe it was Maya Angelou who said that. So, let's not quibble over whether it was racist or not. Let's quibble over why is it a problem that they're here. Ask the right questions. Thank you.